Police officer takes his wheelchair-bound daughter to church. Upon hearing the priest's response, he takes unexpected action. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The church was silent, except for the soft whispers of prayer. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the congregation. It was Sunday morning, like any other, until it wasn't. Michael Harris stood in the center aisle, his service weapon pointed at Father Thomas. The former police officer's hand trembled, but his voice was steady. "If God doesn't heal my daughter right now, you die." Gasps rippled through the church. Phones rose in the air, recording. Emily, just 12 years old, sat in her wheelchair beside her father, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Daddy," she whispered, "what are you doing?" But what had driven this father to such a breaking point? How did a decorated veteran and respected former officer end up threatening a priest in front of dozens of witnesses? 6 months earlier, Michael sat in yet another sterile waiting room, a familiar heaviness in his chest. The fluorescent lights hummed. Overhead, as Emily flipped through a worn magazine, her wheelchair positioned next to his chair. Her legs, once strong and active, now lay still beneath a colorful blanket. "Mr. Harris?" the receptionist called, not looking up from her computer. "The doctor will see you now." Michael wheeled Emily down the hallway, practicing his arguments in his head. This specialist was their fifth, their last hope after insurance denials and wait lists that stretched into years. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harris," the doctor said after examining Emily. The words Michael had heard too many times before. "There is a treatment that could help, but your insurance won't cover experimental procedures." "How much?" Michael asked, his voice hollow. When the doctor named the figure, Michael's heart sank. It might as well have been $1 million. That evening, as Emily slept, Michael opened his mailbox to find another letter. The final appeal. Denied. He stood motionless in the hallway, the paper trembling in his hand. Through the partially open door, he could see Emily's wheelchair beside her bed. On her nightstand sat a framed photo from before, Emily standing proudly in her soccer uniform, trophy, raised high. Beside it lay a prayer card Father Thomas had given her, with words about faith and patience. Michael crumpled the denial letter in his fist. He'd followed every rule, filed every form, waited in every line. He'd served his country and protected his community. And now, when his daughter needed help, the systems he'd trusted had abandoned them both. Something changed in Michael Harris that evening. A switch flipped. The disciplined officer who believed in order and process began to fade away, replaced by a desperate father who could see only one thing: his daughter's suffering. He sat at the kitchen table until dawn, staring at nothing, his mind racing through options that no longer existed. When Emily wheeled herself into the kitchen for breakfast, Michael looked at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. "We're going to church today," he said quietly. Emily's face brightened. "Really? You haven't wanted to go since—" "I think it's time we asked for help directly," Michael replied, his expression unreadable. "Don't you?" What Emily couldn't know was that in the darkest hour of night, her father had opened a locked box in his closet and removed his old service weapon, and what no one in the church would realize until it was too late was that Michael Harris no longer believed in patience or procedure. He believed only in doing whatever it took to save his daughter. Michael sat beside Emily's bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept. The digital clock on her nightstand glowed 2:17 a.m. Sleep had become a luxury he could rarely afford, his mind constantly churning with worry and plans that led nowhere. He gently adjusted her blanket, careful not to wake her. In sleep, Emily looked peaceful, free from the daily struggles that had become their reality since the medical error 2 years ago. One simple mistake during a routine procedure had changed everything. "We deeply regret the complications," the hospital administrator had said, words delivered with practiced detachment. "But our investigation found no evidence of negligence." Michael closed his eyes, the memory washing over him. Before the injury, Emily had been everywhere at once. Soccer star, science club president, always in motion. Now each small movement required tremendous effort. The morning light eventually filtered through the curtains. Michael prepared breakfast, arranging Emily's medications beside her plate, an assortment of pills that helped manage her pain but did nothing to heal the damage. "Dad, you look tired," Emily said, studying his face as she took her first pill. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Michael replied with a forced smile, "just thinking about things. About getting me fixed?" Her directness still caught him off guard sometimes. Michael nodded, unable to find words that wouldn't sound like empty promises. They'd had too many disappointments already. The doorbell rang. Father Thomas stood on the porch, his, clerical collar stark against his black shirt. Michael had known Thomas since childhood. They'd grown up on the same street, played on the same baseball teams. Now Thomas was the respected leader of St. Catherine's. And Michael was barely holding it together. "I came as soon as I got your message," Father Thomas said, accepting the coffee Michael offered. "You mentioned needing spiritual guidance?" In the living room, Emily brightened at the sight of their visitor. "Father Thomas, did you bring any new books?" The priest smiled, producing a paperback from his jacket. "As promised." While Emily examined her gift, the men spoke in low voices. "Thomas, we're out of options," Michael explained, showing him the denial letters. "The treatment exists, but we can't access it. I've tried everything." Father Thomas nodded sympathetically. "The church has been praying for Emily. God has a plan, even when—" "She needs more than prayers," Michael interrupted. "The church fundraises for missions overseas. Could the congregation help with Emily's treatment? Just enough to start the process?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Michael, church funds are allocated by committee. Individual medical treatments, no matter how worthy, aren't typically—" "Typically," Michael's voice sharpened. "There's nothing typical about watching your child suffer when help exists just out of reach." The priest placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "I'll mention it to the committee, but I must be honest, our budget is tight. The best I can offer now is continued prayer and spiritual support." After Father Thomas left, promising to return Sunday, Michael stood motionless in the hallway. Emily's voice broke through his thoughts. "Dad, are we going to church this Sunday?" Michael turned, seeing hope in her eyes. "Yes, we are." That night, after Emily was asleep, Michael opened his closet and pushed aside hanging clothes. At the back sat a metal lockbox. His fingers hesitated over the combination lock, memories of his police service flooding back. He'd sworn to protect the, vulnerable, to serve justice, to maintain order. The lock clicked open. Inside lay his service weapon, untouched since he'd resigned to care for Emily full-time. "What are you thinking, Michael?" he whispered to himself, staring at the gun. He didn't know. Not yet. But for the first time in months, he felt something besides helplessness, something that might save his daughter. The specialized medical center stood like a beacon of hope, its modern glass facade reflecting the morning sunlight. Michael had driven 2 hours to get here, making arrangements for a neighbor to stay with Emily. This was the clinic everyone talked about, the place where seemingly impossible recoveries happened. "Mr. Harris?" called the receptionist. "Dr. Reynolds will see you now." Dr. Reynolds was younger than Michael expected, but her office walls displayed impressive credentials. She reviewed Emily's medical records with focused attention, occasionally making notes. "Based on these scans," she said finally, looking up at Michael, "Emily's condition isn't permanent." Michael's heart leapt. "You mean she could walk again?" "With the right treatment protocol, yes. There's significant potential for recovery." Dr. Reynolds pulled out a tablet and showed Michael images of neural pathways. "The damage isn't as severe as previously assessed. Our approach combines targeted physical therapy with new regenerative treatments." For the first time in 2 years, Michael felt genuine hope blossoming in his chest. "How soon can we start?" Dr. Reynolds' expression shifted. "That's where things get complicated. This treatment isn't covered by standard insurance. It's considered experimental, despite our documented success rates. How much? Michael asked, bracing himself. The figure Dr. Reynolds quoted made the room spin. It was more than his annual salary when he was on the force. We do have financing options, she added, seeing his expression. And occasionally research grants become available. Michael left with pamphlets and application forms, his emotions a turbulent mix of hope and despair. There was a way to help Emily, but it might as well be on the moon for all their ability to access it. That evening, Emily noticed his distraction during dinner. "Dad, where did you go today?" Michael hesitated. Should he share the hope or shield her from another potential disappointment? "I saw a new doctor about your condition." Emily put down her fork. "And she thinks you could improve with special treatment." He carefully avoided promising too much. Emily's eyes widened. "Like, walk again, even a little?" "It's possible," Michael said, his heart aching at her immediate excitement. "But the treatment isn't covered by our insurance. It's very expensive." Emily's face fell, but only momentarily. "We'll figure it out, right? You always say where there's a will, there's a way." Michael nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Later, after tucking Emily in, Michael researched everything he could about the treatment. Online forums were filled with families in similar situations, many remortgaging homes or draining retirement accounts to pay for medical care. Some held community fundraisers, others created online campaigns. Michael started a fundraising page for Emily, writing her story with painful honesty. By morning, they had received $172 in donations. At that rate, they might afford the treatment in about 20 years. Sunday morning arrived bright and clear. Michael helped Emily into her best dress, arranging her legs carefully as he lifted her into the wheelchair. "Do I look pretty, Dad?" she asked, smoothing the fabric over her knees. "Beautiful," he replied truthfully. St. Catherine's Church was crowded when they arrived. Father Thomas greeted them warmly, making a special effort to kneel beside Emily's wheelchair. "We're so happy to see you both," he said, squeezing Emily's hand. During the service, Michael watched Emily's face as Father Thomas spoke about healing miracles from the Bible. Her expression was transfixed, believing in possibilities that seemed increasingly remote to him. "And now," Father Thomas announced, "we'll have a special prayer for those in our community facing illness and hardship." Emily looked up at Michael, eyes shining. "That's for people like me, right?" "That's right," Michael said, his gaze fixed on Father Thomas, the man who had been his childhood friend, the man who represented a system of belief that promised comfort but delivered only words. As they bowed their heads for prayer, Michael's hand drifted to his jacket pocket, feeling the hard outline of the car keys inside. Not today, but soon perhaps he would bring something else to church, something that might finally make people listen. "Please heal Emily," he whispered, eyes closed tight. "Someone, anyone, please." The community center buzzed with activity as volunteers hung streamers and arranged folding tables. A hand-painted banner stretched across the entrance. "Hope for Emily, Walk Again fundraiser." Michael stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. His neighbor Mrs. Chen had organized everything after seeing their online fundraising page. I don't know what to say," Michael stammered as Mrs. Chen approached. "Say nothing. Just enjoy," she replied with a warm smile. "Emily helped my son with math last year. Now we help Emily." Throughout the afternoon, neighbors and former colleagues streamed in. Michael's old police partner Jackson arrived with his entire family, immediately writing a check that brought tears to Michael's eyes. "The department misses you," Jackson said, clapping Michael's shoulder. Emily was the star of the event, wheeling from table to table, thanking everyone with genuine joy. Michael watched her laughing with other children, momentarily free from the isolation that had become their norm. By evening, the fundraiser had collected $4,700, far from their goal, but enough to start the initial evaluation at Dr. Reynolds' clinic. "We did it, Dad," Emily exclaimed as they drove home. "I'm going to get better." Michael nodded, not trusting himself to speak. It was a start, but the road ahead remained dauntingly long. The next morning, Michael called Dr. Reynolds's office to schedule Emily's evaluation. 2 weeks later, they sat in the modern clinic once again, this time with Emily present. Dr. Reynolds conducted a thorough examination, speaking directly to Emily rather than over her head. "You've maintained excellent muscle tone despite limited mobility," she noted, testing Emily's reflexes. "That's going to help tremendously." After the physical exam came cognitive tests, followed by a specialized scan. When all was complete, Dr. Reynolds met with them in her office. "Emily is an excellent candidate for our program," she confirmed. "We can begin a modified protocol with the funds you've raised. It won't be the full treatment yet, but it will start the process and give us valuable data on her response." Emily beamed. "When do we start?" "Next week, if that works for your schedule." As they left the clinic, Emily couldn't stop talking about the future. "Maybe I'll be able to stand for my school picture next year, or take a few steps at graduation." Her optimism was infectious. For the first time in years, Michael allowed himself to believe things might actually improve. The first therapy session was grueling but productive. Emily returned home exhausted but proud of her efforts. 3 sessions later, Dr. Reynolds reported subtle improvements in nerve response. "It's working," she told Michael privately, slowly but definitively. That Sunday, they attended church with renewed spirits. Father Thomas noticed the change immediately. "You both look well," he commented after the service. "I heard about the fundraiser. That's wonderful news." "Would you like to come for dinner this week?" Michael offered spontaneously. "Emily would love to show you her exercises." Thomas accepted readily. "Wednesday works for me." When Wednesday arrived, Michael prepared Emily's favorite pasta dish while she practiced her therapy exercises in the living room. Father Thomas arrived with a chocolate cake and a children's book about courage. During dinner, Emily enthusiastically demonstrated the small movements she'd recovered in her right foot. "Look!" She concentrated fiercely, wiggling her toes slightly. "I couldn't do this last month." "That's remarkable, Emily," Father Thomas said, genuinely impressed. "God is good." After Emily went to bed, the 2 men sat in the living room with coffee. "Michael, I spoke to the church committee about Emily's situation," Thomas began. Michael straightened. "And they were moved by her story. We might be able to contribute something from our emergency assistance fund." Hope flickered in Michael's chest. "That would be incredible, Thomas. Even a small amount would help extend her therapy." Father Thomas nodded, looking pleased. "I'll have more details after Sunday's committee meeting." Later that night, after Thomas had left, Michael felt lighter than he had in months. The therapy was working. The church might help. Perhaps everything would work out without drastic measures. As he walked past the church office on Sunday, however, Michael overheard a conversation that froze him in place. "Harris situation," Father Thomas was saying to someone inside. "How much are they asking for?" asked an older voice. "Mr. Dawson, the head of the finance committee. They need thousands for the full treatment," Thomas replied. "But we need to be realistic about expectations. Church emergency funds aren't meant for ongoing medical expenses." Michael stood perfectly still, the brief flame of hope extinguishing as quickly as it had ignited. Some things, it seemed, would never change. The call came at 3:14 a.m. Michael fumbled for his phone in the darkness, heart racing at the unexpected sound. "Mr. Harris, this is Night Nurse Jenkins from Memorial Hospital. Emily has developed a high fever. We need you to come in immediately." Michael dressed in seconds, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. The hospital was eerily quiet when he arrived, save for the mechanical beeps of monitoring equipment. Emily lay small and pale against the white sheets, her forehead glistening with sweat despite the cool room. Dr. Martinez, the overnight physician, met Michael in the hallway. "She's fighting an infection," he explained gently. "It's not uncommon with her condition, but we need to be cautious." "What about her therapy sessions? Will this affect her progress?" Michael asked, his voice tight with concern. Dr. Martinez's hesitation told Michael everything before he even spoke. "We'll need to suspend all physical therapy until the infection clears completely. And unfortunately, when dealing with neural rehabilitation, Any pause can mean starting over, Michael finished, the words tasting bitter. For 3 days, Michael barely left. Emily sighed, watching helplessly as her fever spiked and broke. The infection responded slowly to antibiotics. Each hour that passed meant another step backward in her recovery. On the 4th day, when Emily was finally sleeping peacefully, Michael stepped into the hallway to call. "Dr. Reynolds, I'm so sorry about this setback," she said after he explained the situation. "But we'll need to reassess completely once she's well, and," she paused, "given the interruption in treatment, your insurance might require new authorizations." "But we paid for the initial sessions out of pocket," Michael protested. "Yes, but moving forward after this medical event will be complicated. The paperwork alone could take weeks. Weeks they didn't have. Money they didn't have." Michael ended the call and slumped against the wall, exhaustion and despair washing over him in equal measure. He dialed Father Thomas's number without thinking. "Michael, is everything all right?" Thomas answered, concern evident in his voice. "Emily's in the hospital. Infection. Her therapy progress is gone," Michael said flatly. "I don't know what to do anymore." "I'll come right away," Father Thomas promised. But he didn't come. Not that day. A text message arrived instead. "Emergency counseling session. We'll visit tomorrow. Praying for Emily." Tomorrow came and went. Then another day. Father Thomas finally appeared on the 3rd evening, offering platitudes about God's mysterious ways and spiritual comfort. "Sometimes we must accept that healing comes in different forms than we expect," Thomas said gently beside Emily's bed. Michael stared at his childhood friend, now suddenly a stranger in clerical clothing. The rage and disappointment he felt must have shown on his face, because Father Thomas quickly changed the subject. That night, after visiting hours ended, Michael drove home to shower and change clothes. In the silence of his empty house, he moved mechanically through the motions until he found himself standing before his closet, staring at the lockbox that contained his service weapon. He lifted it with steady hands and placed it on the bed. Some decisions once made cannot be unmade. 5 days later, Emily was finally released from the hospital. Her infection had cleared, but the setback had left her visibly weaker. Michael wheeled her through their front door, where a small welcome home sign hung, courtesy of Mrs. Chen next door. "It's good to be back," Emily said, her voice thin but determined. Michael busied himself with settling her on the living room couch, arranging pillows and blankets just so. He'd taken a leave of absence from his part-time security job, which meant even less income, but Emily needed him now more than ever. "Dad," Emily said as he adjusted her blanket for the 3rd time. "You're hovering." Michael stopped, realizing she was right. "Sorry, sweetheart." "It's okay." She patted the couch beside her. "Sit with me instead." He sank down next to her, suddenly aware of how exhausted he truly was. The past week had drained him in ways he couldn't articulate. "We'll figure it out," Emily said quietly, taking his hand. "We always do." Michael marveled at her resilience. When had their roles reversed? When had she become the one comforting him? Later that afternoon, while Emily napped, the doorbell rang. Michael opened it to find a woman he didn't recognize, holding a casserole dish. "I'm Angela Parker," she introduced herself. "My son Ryan was at Memorial the same time as Emily. He has spinal muscular atrophy." Michael vaguely recalled seeing a boy about Emily's age in a motorized wheelchair. "I heard what happened with her therapy," Angela continued. "May I come in? I might have information that could help." Over coffee, Angela shared her own journey navigating the medical system for her son. "There's a specialist giving a talk at the medical conference this weekend. Dr. Wei. He pioneered a treatment that helped Ryan regain function no one thought possible." Michael leaned forward. "Is it expensive?" "Yes and no," Angela replied carefully. "The initial consultations are costly, but he works with a foundation that provides grants to qualifying patients. Ryan was one of them." For the first time since the infection, Michael felt a flicker of hope. "How do we apply?" Angela pulled a folder from her bag. "I brought all the information. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but it's worth trying. After she left, Michael researched Dr. Wei extensively. His credentials were impeccable, his success stories numerous. The conference was just 2 days away. A medical conference? Emily asked when Michael explained where he'd be going that Saturday. Can I come? Michael hesitated. She was still recovering, but her eager expression was hard to resist. If you're feeling strong enough, yes. The conference center bustled with medical professionals and displays of cutting-edge technology. Emily's eyes widened at the exhibits of advanced prosthetics and rehabilitation equipment. Look, Dad. She pointed to a demonstration of an exoskeleton helping a young man walk. Could I use something like that someday? Maybe, Michael answered truthfully. That's why we're here, to learn about all the possibilities. Dr. Wei's presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. As they waited in the crowded auditorium, Michael noticed Emily's excitement. It was the most animated he'd seen her since before the hospitalization. The presentation was technical but accessible. Dr. Wei discussed neuroplasticity and recovery patterns with compassionate authority. When he showed before and after videos of his patients, Emily squeezed Michael's hand tightly. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Michael approached Dr. Wei. To his surprise, the doctor gave them his full attention, kneeling to speak with Emily at eye level. Your case sounds very promising, Dr. Wei told her after hearing a simplified version. For medical history, the type of injury you have often responds well to our protocol. What would it cost? Michael asked the inevitable question. Dr. Wei didn't flinch. The full treatment is expensive, yes, but we evaluate each case individually for our foundation grants. Some patients qualify for full coverage. As they left the conference center, Emily couldn't stop talking about everything they'd learned. Her enthusiasm was infectious. For the first time in weeks, Michael allowed himself to hope again. That evening, as he helped Emily get ready for bed, she handed him a church bulletin that had arrived in the mail. Look, Dad, she pointed to an announcement circled in red. The bishop is coming next Sunday for a special healing service. It says right here, miracles happen when we believe. Can we go? Michael stared at the bulletin, his mind suddenly racing in unexpected directions. The bishop, a healing service, an entire congregation of witnesses. Yes, he said slowly. We definitely should attend that service. The lockbox under his bed suddenly felt less like a desperate last resort and more like an opening door. The application forms for Dr. Wei's foundation filled the kitchen table. Michael worked through them methodically, detailing Emily's medical history, their financial situation, and the impact of her condition on their lives. Each question required careful consideration, and Michael found himself pouring their story onto the pages with unflinching honesty. Need any help? Emily asked, wheeling into the kitchen with a glass of water in her lap, a small feat of independence she'd mastered before her hospitalization. Actually, yes, Michael said, sliding a section toward her. They want to know your goals, what you hope to achieve, if selected for the program. Emily considered this seriously. Should I write something big like walk again, or something smaller, like stand up for 5 minutes? The question caught Michael off guard. What do you want to write? I want to dance at my high school prom, she said without hesitation. Even if it's just swaying a little while holding on to something. Michael turned away, blinking rapidly. I think that's perfect. While Emily wrote her response, Michael checked their fundraising page. Donations had slowed to a trickle after the initial community support. The medical bills from Emily's infection had depleted their savings further. Later that afternoon, Michael helped Emily through a modified version of her therapy exercises. Dr. Reynolds had provided instructions for home practice until they could determine when, or if, they could resume formal sessions. It hurts more than before, Emily admitted, her forehead beading with sweat as she attempted to move her right foot. We can stop, Michael suggested immediately. No, Emily's jaw set with determination. Dr. Wei said consistency is key, even when progress seems slow. Michael watched his daughter push through pain with a resolve that humbled him. After completing her exercises, Emily was exhausted but proud. "One more rep than yesterday," she noted, marking it in her therapy journal. That evening, while Emily rested, Michael sat in the backyard with his phone, finally returning Jackson's calls. "I was starting to think you'd dropped off the planet," his former partner said. Michael explained Emily's hospitalization and their current situation. "Anything I can do?" Jackson asked, the offer sincere. Michael hesitated. "Actually, yes. Could you watch Emily this Thursday? I need to attend an appointment about this foundation application." "Of course," Jackson agreed readily. "Marie will bring dinner too." After ending the call, Michael stared at the church bulletin on the patio table. The special healing service was approaching quickly. He had attended regular services with Emily for years, watching her faith remain unshaken despite her condition. His own belief had wavered, then fractured, then nearly disappeared altogether. Thursday came, and with Jackson watching Emily, Michael drove not to a foundation appointment, but to a quiet, isolated section of the county park. There, in the privacy of his car, he removed his service weapon from its lockbox. The familiar weight in his hand brought back memories of his police training, safety checks, proper handling, responsibility. He had been taught that a weapon was always the last resort, to be used only when all other options were exhausted. Weren't they at that point now? Michael practiced drawing the weapon from inside his jacket, not pointing, not threatening, just ensuring he could access it smoothly if needed. The motion felt foreign after so many years, yet muscle memory remained. What would his fellow officers think if they could see him now? What would Emily think? The thought of his daughter made Michael pause. She still believed in miracles, in goodness, in the power of faith. Would his actions destroy that belief? On Sunday morning, Michael dressed with unusual care, selecting a dark jacket with inside pockets. Emily wore her favorite blue dress, excitement evident in her eyes as they prepared for the special healing service. "Do you think the bishop will pray for me personally?" she asked, as Michael helped her into the car. "I'm sure of it," Michael replied, his voice steady, despite the weight in his jacket pocket. "Today will be a day no one forgets." As they drove to the church, Michael's resolve hardened. One way or another, today would bring change. Today, someone would finally listen. Today, his daughter would have her chance at healing, whatever it took. St. Catherine's Church had never looked so crowded. Cars filled the parking lot and lined the nearby streets. The special healing service with the bishop had drawn people from neighboring communities, all seeking comfort, hope, or miracles. Michael wheeled Emily through the main entrance, where ushers handed out special prayer cards. Emily clutched hers eagerly, reading the printed prayer aloud. "Lord, grant healing to those who seek it, according to your divine will," she recited, her voice blending with the soft organ music filling the sanctuary. Father Thomas greeted them near the front, his face lighting up at Emily's obvious excitement. "Emily, I saved seats for you in the first row," he said warmly, then turned to Michael with a slight furrow in his brow. "You're looking very formal today, Michael." "It's a special occasion," Michael replied, adjusting his jacket with careful precision. The weight of the service weapon pressed against his side, hidden but ever present, like the pressure building inside him over months of denial letters, failed treatments, and hollow promises. The bishop, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes, processed down the center aisle. As the congregation stood, Emily watched with rapt attention, her prayer card clutched tightly in her hands. "Welcome, brothers and sisters," the bishop began, his voice resonant throughout the church. "Today, we gather in faith, believing that God's healing power moves among us." Michael observed the congregation, the eager faces, the hands clasped in prayer, the unquestioning faith. Once he had been like them, before reality had stripped away his illusions. The service progressed through hymns and scripture readings. Emily sang along enthusiastically, her voice clear and bright. When the bishop began his sermon, she leaned forward in her wheelchair. "Healing comes in many forms," the bishop explained, "sometimes immediate, sometimes gradual, sometimes physical, sometimes spiritual, but always according to God's perfect plan and timing. Michael felt a flicker of anger. What kind of perfect plan included a child unable to walk because of someone else's mistake? What divine timing kept treatment just out of reach? His hand moved unconsciously toward his jacket before he caught himself. Not yet. The sermon concluded, and the bishop announced the healing prayers would begin. Those seeking healing, please come forward or raise your hand to be recognized. Emily raised her hand immediately. Michael moved to wheel her forward, his heart pounding so loudly he was certain others must hear it. As they approached the altar, Michael scanned the exits from the corner of his eye, mentally calculating timing and distance. The bishop smiled at Emily, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "What is your name, child?" he asked. "Emily Harris," she answered clearly. "And what healing do you seek today, Emily?" She looked up at him with complete trust. "I want to walk again. Sir, even just a little." The bishop nodded solemnly. "Let us pray for Emily." Father Thomas joined them, standing on Emily's other side. The congregation grew silent as the bishop began to pray. "Heavenly Father, we ask for your healing grace to descend upon Emily. Grant her comfort in her challenges, strength in her journey, and if it be your will, restoration of her body." Michael watched his daughter's face, eyes closed in perfect faith, and felt something crack inside him. The bishop continued praying, his words shifting from physical healing to acceptance of God's plan and finding peace in difficult circumstances. Not a prayer for a miracle, a prayer for resignation. Father Thomas added his own words, "Help Emily and her father find spiritual healing and acceptance." Acceptance. Michael's hand moved to his pocket just as Emily opened her eyes. The hope in her expression began to fade as the prayer continued, focusing not on walking again, but on spiritual wholeness and peace in limitations. Then Emily looked up at Michael, confusion and disappointment clouding her features. Something in her expression made Michael pause, his fingertips touching the cold metal within his pocket. "Thank you, Bishop," Emily said politely when the prayer ended, though tears shimmered in her eyes. "And thank you, Father Thomas." As they moved away from the altar, Emily whispered, "They don't really think I'll walk again, do they, Dad?" Michael froze, his hand still, his hand in his pocket. The carefully constructed plan in his mind suddenly collided with the reality of his daughter's perception. She understood, perhaps had always understood, what the adults around her truly believed. In that moment, Michael faced an unexpected choice. The weapon in his pocket represented one path, but Emily's quiet dignity suggested another. Which would he choose? Michael's hand slowly withdrew from his pocket. Empty. Not today. Not with Emily looking at him like that, seeing through the well-meaning but hollow prayers with a wisdom beyond her years. "Let's go home." "Sweetheart," he said quietly. "But the service isn't over," Emily replied, though her earlier enthusiasm had dimmed considerably. "I think we've heard enough for today." As they moved toward the exit, Father Thomas approached, concern evident in his expression. "Leaving already? The bishop will be offering individual blessings after the service." Michael paused, acutely aware of Emily listening. "Thomas, what Emily needs isn't another blessing asking her to accept her condition. She needs actual help, real treatment, not words about God's mysterious plan." Father Thomas's face reddened slightly. "Michael, faith requires patience." "She's been patient for 2 years," Michael interrupted, his voice low but intense. "The treatments exist. The specialists exist. What doesn't exist is the money to access them because insurance companies and committees decide who's worth helping." Several nearby parishioners turned to listen. Emily tugged at Michael's sleeve, uncomfortable with the attention. "Dad, please," she whispered. "It's okay." But something had broken open in Michael, and words poured out with unstoppable force. "No, it's not okay. None of this is okay. Emily was injured because of someone else's mistake. Now we're told to pray for acceptance rather than healing. to embrace limitation rather than fight for treatment. The bishop approached, drawn by the commotion. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes, there is," Michael said, turning to face him directly. "Your, healing service offers comfort without action, hope without help. My daughter needs both." A hush fell over the nearby congregants. Emily's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, though her eyes reflected a complex mixture of pride and uncertainty. The bishop considered Michael thoughtfully before responding. "Your frustration is understandable. Perhaps we could speak privately after the service." "More words," Michael said, shaking his head. Meanwhile, Emily's window for effective treatment narrows every day. Her doctor calls it a critical period, when recovery is still possible. But by the time everyone's done talking and praying, that window will close forever. Father Thomas placed a hand on Michael's arm. "Michael, please. This isn't the appropriate—" "When is it appropriate, Thomas?" Michael's voice cracked with emotion. "When she's an adult, when it's too late, when we've all accepted that this is just how it is?" People were openly staring now. Someone in the back of the church had raised a phone, recording the confrontation. Emily's eyes filled with tears, though whether from embarrassment or something else, Michael couldn't tell. "I think you should go," Father Thomas said finally, his expression a mixture of concern and discomfort. "Take some time to calm down. We can discuss this later." Michael nodded stiffly, suddenly aware of how close he'd come to doing something unthinkable. The weight in his pocket seemed to burn against his side. As he wheeled Emily toward the exit, murmurs followed them, some sympathetic, others critical of the disruption. The bishop called after them, "We'll pray for you both." Outside in the parking lot, Emily was uncharacteristically quiet as Michael helped her into the car. "I'm sorry, Em," he said, kneeling beside her. "I shouldn't have made a scene." She studied his face for a long moment. "You're really angry, aren't you? Not just at the church, but at everyone." The simple observation pierced through Michael's defenses. "Yes," he admitted. "I'm angry that no one seems to understand the urgency. That treatments exist but we can't access them. That people offer prayers instead of practical help." Emily reached out to touch his face. "I understand, Dad. I'm sometimes angry too." She paused, then asked with sudden directness, "What were you going to do in there? You kept reaching into your pocket." The how question caught Michael off guard. How perceptive his daughter had become. How careful he needed to be with his answer. "I was thinking of doing something I would have regretted," he said truthfully. "Something that wouldn't have helped either of us." Emily nodded, seeming to accept this. "Sometimes. I want to scream or break things too. But then what? Out of the mouths of children." Michael stood and closed her car door, walking around to the driver's side with a heaviness in his steps. As they pulled away from the church, Michael glanced in the rearview mirror. Father Thomas stood watching. Them from the steps, phone in hand, probably calling to apologize later. Too little, too late. The service weapon remained in Michael's pocket, unused but not forgotten. A line had been approached today, but not crossed. Not yet. But the special healing service with the bishop would return next month, and by then, Emily's critical treatment window might be closing for good. The phone rang 3 times before Michael answered it. Dr. Wei's voice came through clear and professional. "Mr. Harris, I'm calling about Emily's application to our foundation program." Michael's grip tightened on the phone. "Yes, we've reviewed her case. The committee was quite impressed with her determination and your advocacy." Michael held his breath, hardly daring to hope. "Emily has been selected for partial funding," Dr. Wei continued. "We can cover approximately 60% of the treatment costs." 60%. A significant amount, but still leaving thousands of dollars they didn't have. Michael closed his eyes, emotions warring within him. That's wonderful news," he managed. "Thank you. There's one more thing," Dr. Wei added. "The treatment window we discussed, it's narrowing. For optimal results, we should begin within the next 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The timeline echoed in Michael's mind as he hung up. He walked to Emily's room, where she was reading on her bed. "Dr. Wei called," he said, sitting beside her. "You've been approved for partial funding." Emily's book dropped. "Really, that's amazing. When do we start?" "Soon," Michael replied carefully. "We still need to find the rest of the money, but it's progress." Emily's smile was radiant. "I knew something good would happen. We just needed to keep believing." Her unwavering optimism squeezed Michael's heart. That evening, after Emily was asleep, he made a decision. One last attempt at the proper channels before what? The thought remained unfinished in his mind. The next morning, Michael arrived at St. Catherine's church office without an appointment. The secretary looked surprised but directed him to Father Thomas's study. "Michael," Thomas greeted him cautiously. "I've been meaning to call after Sunday's incident. I need to speak with you privately," Michael said without preamble. "It's important." Once the door closed, Michael laid out the situation clearly. The foundation's partial funding, the narrow treatment window, the remaining financial gap. "Emily has a real chance now," he explained. "But we need help to bridge the final gap. Not prayers or blessings, actual financial assistance." Father Thomas listened attentively before responding. "I understand your urgency, Michael, truly. But church funds aren't my personal checkbook. There's a committee, protocols." "The committee," Michael interrupted, frustration mounting. "Always the committee. Do they understand that every day of delay means Emily's chances diminish?" "I'll call an emergency meeting," Father Thomas offered. "Present the case as urgent, but Michael, even then, our resources are limited." Michael stood abruptly. "The next special healing service. When exactly is it?" Father Thomas looked puzzled by the sudden change of subject. 2 weeks from Sunday, the bishop returns for 2 weeks, Michael echoed. "That's when we'll have your answer then." As Michael turned to leave, Father Thomas called after him. "What does that mean, Michael?" But Michael was already walking away, his mind made up. 2 weeks. One last chance for the system to work before he took matters into his own hands. In his car, Michael finally completed the thought he'd been avoiding. Before he forced them all to listen, no matter what it took. The days crawled by with agonizing slowness. Michael checked his phone constantly, hoping for news from Father Thomas about the emergency. Committee meeting. Each morning he helped Emily through her exercises with forced cheerfulness, never revealing the storm brewing inside him. "Dad, look," Emily called one afternoon. "Dr. Way sent us the treatment schedule. We start next Monday, if we confirm by Friday." Michael examined the detailed plan, intensive therapy sessions, specialized equipment, a team of experts all coordinated for Emily's specific needs. It was everything they had hoped for, and still just out of reach. "It's perfect," he said, masking his turmoil. "We'll make it happen." Thursday evening, Father Thomas finally called. "The committee met yesterday," he began. "I presented Emily's case as urgent." Michael held his breath. "And?" "They approved a contribution," Father Thomas said. "The church can provide $2,000 toward Emily's treatment." $2,000, a fraction of what they needed. Michael's free hand curled into a fist. That's the best they could do?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "It was all we could manage given our other commitments," Father Thomas explained. "But I've reached out to several parishioners privately. Some have offered additional help." Michael thanked him mechanically and ended the call. Sitting alone in the kitchen, he calculated the numbers again. Even with the church's contribution and the private donations Thomas mentioned, they would still fall significantly short. The special healing service was just 10 days away. Now. That night, Michael removed the service weapon from its hiding place. He checked it methodically, his police training taking over. Then he opened his closet and selected his darkest suit, the one he'd worn to his wife's funeral years ago. Some decisions, once set in motion, developed a momentum of their own. "Dad?" Emily's voice startled him. She had wheeled herself to his bedroom doorway without him hearing. "What are you doing with that?" Michael turned, the weapon still in his hand. For one suspended moment, Michael and Emily stared at each other, father and daughter caught in a tableau of unspoken truths. The service weapon gleamed dully in Michael's hand. I was just checking it, Michael said finally, carefully placing the gun on his dresser, making sure it's secure. Emily's eyes, wise beyond her years, held his gaze. You were never good at lying, Dad. She wheeled herself fully into the room, stopping beside his bed where the dark suit lay spread out. The healing service is this Sunday, she observed quietly. Michael nodded, unable to form words. What were you planning to do? Emily asked directly. The question hung in the air between them. Michael sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the weight of his intentions suddenly unbearable under his daughter's clear gaze. I don't know anymore, he admitted. I wanted someone to listen. Really listen. Emily reached for his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his. Not like this, Dad. Whatever you were thinking, not like this. They have all the power, Em, Michael said, his voice breaking. The insurance companies, the hospitals, even the church. They make decisions about your life, our lives, and we're just supposed to accept them. So you were going to what? Threaten Father Thomas? The bishop? Emily's voice remained calm, though her eyes widened. That wouldn't help me walk again. It would just take you away from me. The simple truth of her words pierced Michael's carefully constructed justifications. The image of Emily alone without him flashed through his mind. I feel so powerless, he whispered. Emily squeezed his hand. You're the strongest person I know, Dad. But this isn't strength. This is fear. From the mouth of his child came wisdom that stopped Michael cold. She was right. Behind his anger lay fear, bone deep, consuming fear for his daughter's future. Dr. Wei called again while you were in the shower, Emily said, changing the subject. He has an idea, something about a clinical trial starting next week. He said it might be a better option for us. Hope, fragile but persistent, flickered in Michael's chest. What kind of clinical trial? I don't know all the details. He wants to meet with us tomorrow. Michael looked at the gun on his dresser, then back at his daughter. The path he'd been contemplating suddenly seemed like madness in the light of her steady presence. Dad, Emily said firmly, promise me you won't. It's me you. Do anything that would take you away from me. No matter what happens with the treatment, promise. Michael felt tears burning behind his eyes. I promise, Em. She nodded, satisfied. Good. Now put that away and help me back to bed. We have an early appointment tomorrow. As Michael lifted his daughter from her wheelchair, he marveled at her strength, not physical but spiritual. In his darkest hour, she had been his light. That night, Michael returned the service weapon to its lockbox and slid it back to the highest shelf in his closet. The dark suit went back on its hanger. The path of desperation had been blocked by the wisdom of a child. But what path remained open to them now? Tomorrow would tell. Dr. Wei's office was flooded with morning light. He greeted Michael and Emily with genuine warmth, taking time to ask Emily about her recent physical therapy exercises before addressing the reason for their visit. I mentioned a clinical trial, he began, opening a folder on his desk. It's a new approach to spinal rehabilitation, combining advanced physical therapy with neurostimulation. The results from the preliminary phase have been remarkable. Emily leaned forward. Her wheelchair. Would I qualify? That's the good news, Dr. Wei smiled. Based on your medical history and current condition, you're an ideal candidate. The even better news is that all treatment costs are covered by the research grant. Michael felt as if the floor had suddenly tilted beneath him. Completely covered? No cost to us at all? Dr. Wei nodded. The research team is particularly interested in patients like Emily, young, otherwise healthy, with injuries that occurred during development. The trial begins next Wednesday. What's the catch? Michael asked, hardly daring to believe such an opportunity could fall into their laps. There are 2 conditions, Dr. Wei explained. First, the treatment protocol is intensive, 5 days a week for the initial 8 weeks. That means significant time commitment from both of you. We can manage that, Michael said without hesitation. Second, the trial requires participants to document their journey, video diaries, regular interviews, allowing the team to record therapy sessions for research purposes. Emily brightened. Like being in a documentary. That sounds cool. Dr. Wei smiled at her enthusiasm, something like, that, yes. The goal is to track not just physical progress, but the emotional and psychological aspects of recovery as well. Michael felt hope rising in his chest, cautious at first, then stronger. When do we start? There's some paperwork to complete today, Dr. Wei said, sliding forms across his desk. Then a preliminary evaluation on Monday, and the first treatment session next Wednesday. As they left the office, Emily couldn't contain her excitement. Did you hear that, Dad? I might be walking by Christmas. Dr. Wei didn't promise that, Michael cautioned gently, though his own heart was racing with possibility. But it's definitely a chance we didn't have yesterday. That afternoon, Michael made 2 important calls. The first was to Father Thomas, explaining the unexpected opportunity and thanking him for the church's contribution, which could now be redirected to another family in need. The second call was to his former partner Jackson. I need a favor, Michael explained. Something important for Emily. Sunday morning arrived clear and bright, the day of the special healing service. Michael helped Emily into a pretty dress, her mood lighter than it had been in months. Are you sure you still want to go? Michael asked as he tied the ribbons on her shoes. After everything that's happened, I wouldn't blame you for wanting to skip church today. Emily looked surprised. Of course I want to go. I have good news to share, and… She hesitated. I think you might have something to say too. Michael understood her meaning immediately. Some apologies were overdue. St. Catherine's was packed for the healing service, just as it had been before. Whispers followed them as Michael wheeled Emily down the center aisle, but this time the weight in his pocket was just his car keys, nothing more. Father Thomas approached them cautiously. Michael, Emily, I'm glad you came. We have news, Emily announced, her voice bright with excitement. I've been accepted into a clinical trial. I start treatment next week. Father Thomas's face lit up with genuine joy. That's wonderful, Emily. God does work in mysterious ways. Speaking of which, Michael said, his voice low, I owe you an apology, Thomas. My behavior at the last service was inappropriate. Father Thomas shook his head. Your frustration was understandable. I could have done more to help. Sooner? As they spoke, the bishop approached. I remember you both from my last visit, he said warmly. I understand congratulations are in order, young lady. Emily beamed. Yes, sir. I got into a special program. Excellent news, the bishop replied. Would you be willing to share your story? During the service today? It might inspire others who are waiting for their own breakthrough. Emily looked to Michael, who nodded encouragingly. I'd be happy to, she agreed. Neither Emily nor the bishop could know how different this service would be from what Michael had once planned for it. How? Close they had come to a very different kind of drama unfolding in this sacred space. Instead of a desperate act, today would bring testimony of hope. Instead of force, there would be gratitude. Instead of fear, there would be possibility. As the organ music began, Michael released a breath he felt. He'd been holding for months. Sometimes strength came not from fighting the world, but from finding a new path forward when all seemed lost. The bishop's sermon touched on themes of patience, faith, and unexpected blessings. When the time came for Emily to speak, Michael wheeled her to the front of the church, his heart swelling with pride. Hi, everyone, Emily began, her clear voice carrying throughout the sanctuary. Most of you know me as the girl in the wheelchair. Today, I want you to know me as Emily Harris, who has some pretty big news. The congregation listened attentively as Emily shared her journey, the medical error that changed her life, the countless therapy sessions, the recent infection that had seemed like yet another setback. But here's the thing about setbacks, she continued, confidence growing with each word. Sometimes they lead you to unexpected places. While I was in the hospital, we met another family who told us about Dr. Wei and his clinical trial. And now, I'm starting a new treatment next week. Murmurs of approval spread through the church. Emily's natural storytelling ability had captivated everyone. I don't know if I'll walk again, she admitted. Candidly, the doctors say maybe with a lot of hard work, but what I do know is that I'm not alone in this journey. Emily glanced at Michael, then continued. My dad has fought for me every step of the way. Sometimes he fought too hard. A few knowing chuckles rippled through those who had witnessed Michael's outburst at the previous service, but always because he loves me. Michael's eyes filled with tears. The bishop stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Emily's shoulder. Thank you for sharing your story, Emily. Would you mind if I offered a prayer for your upcoming treatment? I'd like that very much, Emily replied. As the bishop began to pray, Michael noticed something unexpected. Father Thomas was discreetly moving through the congregation, whispering to various members. One by one, people began to stand. Heavenly Father, the bishop intoned, we ask your blessing on Emily as she begins this new treatment. Guide the hands of her doctors and give her strength for the journey ahead. The prayer continued, but Michael's attention was drawn to the growing number of standing congregants. What was happening? As the bishop concluded, Father Thomas approached the microphone. Before we continue with our service, I have an announcement. Many of you know Emily and her father Michael. What you may not know is that while the clinical trial covers the medical treatment, there are many additional expenses, transportation to daily appointments, specialized home equipment, and potential modifications to their house as Emily's mobility changes. Michael felt a flush of embarrassment. He hadn't discussed these concerns with Thomas. Our church has already committed funds to help, Father Thomas continued, but I believe we can do more. Everyone standing has pledged additional support. If others feel called to join them, please stand now. To Michael's astonishment, nearly the entire congregation rose to their feet. Emily gasped beside him, her hand finding his. Sometimes, Father Thomas said, looking directly at Michael, we fail to see the needs right in front of us. Sometimes those in pain feel they must shout to be heard. Today, we're listening, not just with prayers but with action. Later, in the church hall, Michael found himself surrounded by community members offering help, rides to appointments, home-cooked meals, professional services. An electrician volunteered to install ramps at their house. A physical therapist offered complimentary weekend sessions to supplement the clinical treatments. I don't understand, Michael said to Father Thomas when they had a moment alone. After how I behaved. Father Thomas smiled. Your outburst at the last service was uncomfortable, yes, but it made us confront an uncomfortable truth, that faith without action is hollow. You forced us to see Emily as a person with immediate needs, not just a name on a prayer list. Emily was across the room, surrounded by children her age who were asking questions about her upcoming treatment, treating her with curiosity rather than awkwardness for the first time in years. I almost did something terrible, Michael admitted quietly. That last service, I brought my service weapon. I was so desperate, so angry. Father Thomas's expression registered shock, quickly replaced by compassion. But you didn't. That's what matters, Michael. You found another way. Emily found it, Michael corrected. She saw the gun and made me promise not to do anything that would take me away from her. She saved me from myself. As if sensing they were talking about her, Emily looked up and waved from across the room. Her smile, genuine and hopeful, was like sunshine breaking through clouds. The clinical trial starts Wednesday, Michael said, watching his daughter. For the first time in 2 years, I'm letting myself believe things might actually get better. Father Thomas nodded. Sometimes the miracle isn't what we initially pray for. Sometimes it's the unexpected path that opens when we think all doors have closed. Outside the church, a small crowd had gathered around a local news van. Jackson, Michael's former partner, stood talking with a reporter. What's going on? Michael asked as Thomas followed his gaze. Another surprise, Father Thomas replied with a smile. Jackson thought Emily's story might inspire others. Apparently, the news station agreed. 8 months passed in a blur of early mornings, therapy sessions, and small but meaningful victories. The clinical trial transformed not just Emily's physical capabilities, but their entire lives. The church community had remained steadfast in their support. Rides to appointments, meals delivered during intensive therapy weeks, and weekend volunteers who helped with household tasks Michael couldn't manage alone. The local news story had sparked additional support from unexpected places. A furniture company donated an adjustable bed, and a tech startup provided a specialized computer that Emily could control with minimal movement during her recovery periods. Today marked a special milestone, Emily's final evaluation with the research team. "Ready for the big reveal?" Dr. Wei asked, his eyes twinkling with barely contained excitement, as Michael wheeled Emily into the assessment room. The room had been transformed. At one end stood parallel bars, and at the other, a small set of stairs with sturdy railings. "I've been practicing in secret," Emily confessed to her father. "I wanted to surprise you." Michael's heart raced as Dr. Wei helped Emily position herself at the parallel bars. Her legs, once motionless now, responded to her commands. Not perfectly, not completely, but undeniably. Emily gripped the bars and with determination etched on her face pulled herself to a standing position. Then, with careful concentration, she moved one foot forward, then another, and another. Michael covered his mouth, tears streaming freely down his face as he watched his daughter take 6 steps independently before needing to rest. "That's not all," Dr. Wei said softly. "Emily?" With renewed determination, Emily moved to the small staircase. Gripping the railings tightly, she managed to climb 2 steps, slowly, with tremendous effort but unassisted. "The stairs at home," Michael realized. "You've been practicing for our front porch." Emily nodded, her face shining with perspiration and pride. 3 more months of therapy and Dr. Wei thinks I might manage the whole staircase." Later that afternoon, they visited St. Catherine's Church. Father Thomas met them in the peaceful garden, where Emily demonstrated her newfound ability, taking several steps while holding Michael's arm for balance. "Not exactly dancing at prom yet," she joked, "but I'm getting there. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step," Father Thomas quoted, his own eyes moist with emotion. "I almost took a very different journey," Michael said quietly, while Emily rested on a bench nearby. "If things had gone differently that day with the gun—" "But they didn't," Father Thomas reminded him. "That's grace. Michael, not just Emily's healing, but the fact that you found another way, that the community finally saw what you needed." As they prepared to leave, Emily looked up at the church spire against the blue sky. "Dad, remember when you asked if God had abandoned us?" Michael nodded, recalling his darkest moments. "I think sometimes God works through people," she said thoughtfully. "Through Dr. Wei and his research, through our neighbors bringing meals, through you fighting for me, even when it was hard." Michael helped Emily back into her wheelchair, still necessary for longer distances, and thought about how close they had come to a very different ending. "In the end," Emily continued, "it wasn't one big miracle that changed everything. It was a lot of small ones, one after another." As they drove home, Michael reflected on their journey. The desperate father with a gun in his pocket had been transformed, just as surely as Emily's body was being transformed through treatment and determination. Sometimes the most profound healing happened not in dramatic moments, but in the steady accumulation of love, support, and second chances. In the space where desperation gave way to hope. And sometimes the miracle wasn't what you initially prayed for, but what you discovered along the way.